Is your faith or have your faith taken a back seat in your life? Do you find it harder and harder to make your faith a priority in your life as you pursue your dream while trying to be the husband and father that you know you should be? Or do you sometimes feel guilt over how you spent your day as you realize you didn't give much attention to your faith and maybe your family? Now, if you answered yes to any of the above, this episode is for you. But even if you didn't answer yes, you'll find great value in watching or listening to this episode. So there was a time in my life that I would answer yes to all three of the above questions. And I'm just being fully transparent. I would answer yes to the fact that at times I felt my faith, or actually not felt, I actually had my faith taking a back seat in my life. I also would answer yes that I found it harder and harder to make my faith a priority in my day as I pursued my dream. And I would answer yes that sometimes I felt guilt at the end of my day when I realized that I didn't put as much emphasis or priority in my faith or even my family on that particular day. So I would raise both hands to that, just in case you're wondering. It wasn't always this way for me. Most of what I have learned, or what I learned at the time, and what I heard, what I watched, what I read, it was more to the fact that I was kind of told that you need to keep your faith out of your business. I don't know if that's true for you as well. Maybe it wasn't said in those direct words, but it's how I heard, or how I chose to hear it, or how I understood what was being said, that faith and business are not a good mix, especially that of being a Christian. Maybe you've heard that as well. And maybe you're operating on that principle. Again, I did that for a long time in building my business. And I can tell you, there was almost always a tension, right? A disconnect for me. I felt like I wasn't being fully authentic. And how could I truly be fully authentic when that's a very important part of my life, as I have purported for it to be, right? I have held that for such a long time. So I wasn't fully authentic in my messaging. Something was missing. I felt like I was hiding something. I was holding back. And you know, here's what I also recognize. I was not really working with my ideal audience, my ideal clients. I did find when I was working with my ideal clients, man, it was different. I felt alive. I felt more authentic because it was invited into the conversation. It was invited into my coaching or my counseling. And that client really wanted that to be a part of their experience. And whenever I was in that zone, man, I felt like this is where I needed to be. Have you ever felt that? Has that ever happened to you? Well, in this episode, we're going to talk about how prioritizing faith ignites balance and sustains success at home and in business. So what you have been listening to so far, as you may have by now realized, is a recording I did from my YouTube channel. You can watch it there if you choose to watch the video at Kingsley Grant. Hello and welcome to the Happier Marriage Podcast, the show that challenges you to make marriages happier again by providing you with insights, tips, and strategies to leave a lasting legacy of faith, love, and impact upon your family and your world. I'm your host, Kingsley Grant, And I invite you to join me each week as we endeavor to make this your reality. So are you ready? Here we go.
So, the big question is this. How is it possible that you have a happier marriage when you feel like you've tried everything? Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up. Or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
Now, let's continue with this episode, which, by the way, is episode number 78, where we have been talking about how prioritizing faith ignites a balance in your life and sustains success at home and in business. Now, here is what I want to start off with by saying the importance of balance for Christian business professionals like yourself, like myself as a husband. What are the importance for this balance that we need to have in our lives? I want to begin with this verse of scripture that you have heard and I have heard many, many times, and that's in Mark chapter 8, verse 36. Jesus made this statement. He said, "For what is it worth to gain the whole world and lose your soul?" Another translation says, "What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul?" And especially as we're speaking to you, as I'm speaking to you as a husband like myself and a father, this really resonated when he used the word men, even though we knew that Jesus was referring to humanity, right? Humankind. So what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and lose his soul? That is truly a significant thought, idea we need to wrestle to the ground. Because at the end of the day, what truly matters is not so much what we've attained and achieved here. Because you know what? We cannot take that with us. Recently I was going through some things in my garage and just kind of cleaning up my garage, and I came across an item a tool that my father-in-law, who is dead now for many, many years, had handed to me. He reached a stage in his life when he said, I really don't need this anymore. I'm not using it. And his name for me was King Man, right? It says King's Laser is called King Man. He said, "King Man, do you want it?" I said, "Of course." I called him Daddy J. I said, "Of course, Daddy J, I'll take it." And so I took the tool and I had it with me. I used it for many times. And then I was cleaning up my garage and I began to think about this. I said, I guess the mortality of life in that moment hit me. I'm thinking at some point, a time is going to come when all these things in my garage, the tools and everything else, I won't have any use for that. And whose will these things be? There's a scripture verse about that as well. Whose will these things be? And I said, well, maybe my son may want it. Maybe if he doesn't, somebody else will want it. But the point is, it's going to be passed on. And so I recognize the brevity of life. And so at the end of the day, as you may have heard before, is what we do for God, for Jesus, that matters most, and how we spend time building for the future. Now, this does not mean that we don't build our business. This does not mean we don't pursue and build our career and do the best we can and achieve as much as we can. Because again, it's God who gives us the power to make wealth. And I mentioned that in a few moments. So here's what I find. There are many challenges that you and I face as we pursue as high achieving business professionals, right? There's so many challenges that others may not face as much as we do as we spearhead and lead and, are the initiators or the creators of what we're trying to build our business. We're the driving force. And so it's not as easy. There are many more challenges we face, and the demands that comes with this of building a successful business and career can often leave little time. As you may have experienced and I experienced, it leaves little time for family and spiritual growth. This is not to guilt you. It's just to remind us of what's important, of how we need to prioritize faith, because it has incredible benefits. And I mentioned that in a few moments, right? So what happens, it creates an imbalance in our lives, which lead to stress. It leads to strained relationships. It does with our family, with our children, our wives, right? They experience that strained relationship because sometimes we're not there and we're not as present as we ought to be. And here's what I find as well, a sense of emptiness. A sense of emptiness. Why? Because we're not connected with our Creator, with the God who loves us and that we have a relationship with. And so we find ourselves coming up empty. And, for a time, I used to, because of this inauthenticity or this disconnect, man, I felt like I was, doing all the different things and driving and pushing, but something was missing. Something was missing. So as a husband, your faith and my faith is a foundation upon which we build our lives. So by prioritizing your faith, what that's going to do for you is going to open you up to a world, our access to what we know, the wellspring of strength, right? Where God gives us the strength and wisdom to operate our business. The Bible says, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to us liberally and without reproach. It means God will give us the wisdom we need for our business. And here's the crazy part of it, right? The business we're building, God gave us the idea for the business, right? He gave us the idea in the first place. Wouldn't it make sense to keep on consulting with him on a daily basis about this business so he can give us more ideas and creativity and to enhance and expand? Wouldn't that make sense? But yet we find ourselves getting ahead and start taking over, and we don't consult with God as often as we should. I have been guilty of that. And so I'm speaking from a first person experience as well. So don't hear this as me, trying to be this Bible thumping. No, I've experienced that myself. So when we prioritize our faith, we're going to access this reservoir, this wellspring of wisdom and strength and guidance that can help us navigate what we experience in life, the complexities, right, of life, and how we may lead our family and our business to more success, right? Because when we embrace these biblical principles, right, it's the best way for us to build bulletproof marriages. As I mentioned in the last video, if you've not watched the last video I did, you want to go back and watch that, because I talked about how to build bulletproof marriages and how to raise exceptional children requires this, what I'm talking about. And I expanded more on that in the video that you'll see on, you'll see it on the screen, and you want to go back and watch that. And you may, if you listen to the podcast, so go back and listen to that previous podcast. I think it's episode number 77. But you're going to gain access and to God's reservoir, right? His wellspring, where strength and wisdom and guidance comes from, in helping us to build this business, and to do so without the stress put on our lives and our families, because it's a lot of stress, right? So here's some strategies that you may want to think about, some practical strategies for achieving this balance that I'm describing. Number one, establish your clear boundaries, right? Clear boundary between your work and personal life. This is where I blur the line many times. Even before I started working from home and now doing everything virtual, I would blur the line sometimes. I would, take on clients at late nights or early mornings, and which means I have to violate something. I have to give something up. And many times, unfortunately, it's time spent with my family. So we need to clear, but it came to a point where I decided, you know what, enough is enough. I said, here are my hours. Because when I have to go to the doctor and when you have to go to the doctor, they're saying, here are the hours we operate, find some way to fit into that schedule and make it work. And guess what? We do. And if we think our business is what it is, it always depends on what you're doing as a business, as a matter of fact, but we can still set clear boundaries, no matter what it is, between our work and our personal life. And so we may need to to designate some things that we may need to get some help for, specific times for work. We may need to set times for that, for family and personal reflection. For me, one of those things I've decided at some point back, a few years ago, my wife and I, every single Friday becomes our date night. I establish clear boundaries around that. So at a certain time on Friday, I cut off work and I have it on my schedule. So I have something scheduled. There are exceptions, of course, here and there for life does bring exceptions, and that's understandable. But those are rare things. It should not be the norm. It should not be where you're bumping your date night for other things that could take a second place. Because prioritizing your faith requires prioritizing your family as well, because it's faith, family, and everything else, right? Faith, family, and everything else. And so that has to be very, very, establish clear boundaries. Secondly, delegate and empower others. I'm so thankful for my virtual assistants. They have been a game changer for me in many ways. Yen, who is a reliable person that I can count on to do my social media posts and edit my videos and constantly communicating with me for clarity. But I've handed off that to her. She's very capable and does a very good job. My podcast editor, Jennifer, she likewise does a fantastic job, just like I described. And so I can record my podcast and just give it to her, and she does all the different things and take it from there. So you see, I've delegated that because I can do those things. But here's the thing. If I am only one person, but when I've multiplied myself now with two of my virtual assistants who help me tremendously, it seems like we're getting so much more work done. Not just seem, we are getting much more work done. And so I realize the importance of delegation. And so it's finding the right people. Now, here's what is important again about faith. Before I hired them, I prayed and asked God to lead me to those who He knows I needed, right? And He sent me to right people that have helped me and is helping me in my business. And so I'm trusting them to share the load that frees up time for me to focus on what matters most, right? Which is like recording this video, recording this episode is what only person can do. So I can have them now take it from there, which has tremendously helped me. So find a way to delegate and empower others. Number 3, prioritize quality time with family. Schedule regular time for your family activities, right? Again, I mentioned about date with my wife. That is scheduled. And with my kids, my children are adults now, but when they were much younger, I would schedule time in. So when I would take them to school, because I thank God I had the opportunity to do that, I would schedule with one, I have two children. So I would take one earlier and have a date morning with one of my son or my daughter, and would stop at a McDonald's or wherever else on the way and have breakfast. So we can talk about things in their lives. That's my date time with them. Could I have done that at home? Yes, but this was special. It's special memory built-in. So you want to schedule and prioritize quality time with family, because these moments of connection will strengthen your bond, your family bonds, and create lasting memories like nothing else can. And so number 4 is nurture your spiritual growth. Nurture your spiritual growth. This is so important. Dedicate time each day for prayer or meditation, reading the Bible or listening to the Bible. Each morning I have an app which I call the U version of the Bible, where I listen to the scriptures, I listen to devotionals, and every morning I go through this year after year. For the last several years, I've done this, starting in January 1st, all the way through December. I'm almost finished this year, and I've not missed a day where I've not listened to scriptures and listened to meditation, reflected upon that, and prayed around that. This is one of those ways you can fit that into your schedule. And I find this to be very optimum for me. It works. And of course, my other practices of the weekly church attendance. When I was much younger, I would take my children at the time. Now they're adults, they have to figure out that on their own, but I laid that foundation. So this is very important in nurturing your spiritual growth, because this is where we get our guidance and our wisdom and the download from God, right? God's Spirit speaks to our hearts of how to do certain things and how we can avoid certain things in our lives, because we're depending on Him. So nurture your spiritual growth. Now, here's what I find that all those things leads to. All the roads leads, it culminates to this. The transformative power that comes with this in your faith, in your family, in your business. Here's what I find. Now, before I share with you this transformative power and give an example of how a family experienced this, let me just ask you to subscribe. If you haven't yet subscribed to this video on this YouTube channel, please subscribe, or subscribe to the podcast you're listening to, and hit that like and notification bell. Right, leave a comment below on the show notes you're seeing on the front of this video, and if you're listening to the podcast, leave a review and a rating. I would really appreciate that, because one of the reasons why you subscribe and you make sure you're connected to the notification and so on is that you are notified of any recent, whenever I release a recent episode, you're notified of that. You're made aware of that. And for example, the next follow up to this video, this episode you're listening to and watching, is going to be about faith-fueled connections. How by prioritizing your faith for powerful connection and lasting success in your marriage. So how is this going to translate in your relationship, your communication with your wife and your children? We're going to talk about that on the next episode. So you want to make sure you subscribe to this channel and or the podcast you're listening to. Now, this family is a very famous family, which you are very much aware of and may have heard the story of Abraham and Sarah, right? And you remember how the Bible talks about in Genesis 22, when they had a child, but in Genesis 22, the only son that they had was Isaac, right? And when they had this son that they waited so many years for, God told Abraham that He wanted him to go and offer Isaac, his only son, as a sacrifice on the mountain, Mount Moriah. And Abraham, his willingness to sacrifice his son, he went there, he took his son up on this journey, right? And if you remember the story, his son said to him, "Dad, we're going to sacrifice, but where is the lamb for the sacrifice?" And his dad said, "Son, don't worry. God will provide the sacrifice. God will provide the sacrifice." But God told Abraham that He was to sacrifice his son. But Abraham believed God that even if he sacrificed his son and trusted God, God would raise his son back up, or God's going to provide a sacrifice. And you know how that story all ended up, right? As Abraham was about to sacrifice his son, God says, "No, hold it." And Abraham's hand was all the way down, and God stopped his hand. It's almost like He caught his hand and said, "Nope, hold it." But God was testing Abraham's faith, and Abraham was prioritizing faith over everything else. And God said to him, "Abraham, look." And in the thicket of the bushes right behind, there was a ram that was caught in the thicket in the bushes. And God said, "Go, there is a sacrifice." And he took it and sacrificed that to God. That was moment God said, the Bible talks about how God entrusted faith to Abraham, and He blessed Abraham because of his obedience. He said, "You will be the father of many nations." So God multiplied for Abraham more than he could ever imagine. Abraham was a very wealthy man, a very respectful man. He just became this humongous person, right? A stature of a person among his peers and everybody else. We still talk about him today because Abraham he prioritized his faith. He had faith in God, knowing that God would even raise his son up, even if he had to sacrifice him. When God recognized Abraham's faith, God stopped him. So, my friend, listen, I know it's not easy. I know that I've struggled myself with this at times, but with God's help, I'm working towards making this more of my daily practice. I want this to be my life. I want to be remembered this way, and I know you want to as well. But by prioritizing your faith, my friend, as I mentioned earlier, when you prioritize your faith and make that, a significant part of your life, which is what this really is, by prioritizing your faith, what's going to happen is that you're going to experience the things that we're talking about here. You're going to experience the things that I believe God has in store for you. Like you have not yet, it's like eyes have not seen, ears have not heard what God has in store for you by prioritizing your faith. And that's why I mentioned for the title, how prioritizing your faith ignites balance and sustains success at home and in business. That's what it does when you're able to do the things I outlined before. So I mentioned these strategies. Number 1, establish clear boundaries. Number 2, delegate and empower others. Number 3, prioritize quality time and family. Number 4, nurture your spiritual life. And if there's any indication of how this works, I mentioned to you about Abraham and also of Sarah, of what God did. So as a Christian husband, my friend, you are called, and I'm called, to be the spiritual leader of your family. Your commitment to faith will set the example for your wife and children and to the community, right, who are watching, whether you know it or not. They're looking on. And what this will do is will guide your family towards a life that's rooted in God's love. And that's the greatest gift you can give to your family. A relationship with God, leading by example and making faith first and foremost in your life. That should be one of the things I would recommend that becomes a pillar in your core values in your home. That faith in God, trusting God, the sovereignty of God, that God is sovereign. One of the things I have established in my family and in my life is this phrase, God is sovereign. God is sovereign, and He is. So I hope this will be something that will help you as you prioritize faith in your life. So if you're going to achieve balance as a high-achieving Christian business professional husband, it requires, as I mentioned before, a conscious effort to prioritize faith and then integrate that into every aspect of your life, right? When you do so, my friend, you're going to create a thriving family, right? You're going to raise excellent children. You're going to achieve the success you're after. You're going to have a life that's filled with love and joy and deep sense of purpose. So I want to challenge you today to think about what we've heard, what you've listened to, what you've watched, and maybe go back and listen to portions of this or watch portions of this, but also share this with at least one other husband, one other father, one other couple, that they can actually find something here for themselves as well. And my friend, I really want you to, again, subscribe and hit that notification bell and also that like button so I can get more viewers to this, because I want you to be prepared and be ready for the next upcoming episode that talks about, mentioned before, let me see if I can just quickly find it here, that about how prioritizing your faith for powerful connection with your family, with your wife and your children, and success in your marriage, about bulletproof in your marriage and, raising excellent children, right? This is going to be part of what we're going to talk about next time on the next episode that's coming up. So I want you to make sure you're subscribed to that. Remember this, my friend, that God is your constant companion, and He is ready to give support and guidance and wisdom every step of the way. So embrace your faith, lead with love, and watch as your family blossoms under the powerful hand of God. I guarantee that will happen in your life. My friend, with that said, I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I pray that God will bless you and your family, and you'll experience all that you've heard today and more. And I look forward to having you continue to follow this series and to be a part of this community. So there you have it, my friend. As you have listened to this episode, I hope and pray that it was inspirational and transformational in your life. As you heard, this was a recording that I did on my YouTube channel, and I want to encourage you to watch that, but also other videos I have there as well, shorts and videos that you may have already missed. And when you do go there, would you do me a favor and subscribe to the channel, as you may have already done on this podcast by subscribing? As you know, this is one of those ways that you can help me to get the word around and to spread the good news. Secondly, If you want and have not yet taken the Happier Marriage Secrets Assessment quiz, I want to encourage you to do that because it will help you to find ways to transform your marriage, right? You can take that assessment quiz and get your personalized results instantly. To do so, then go to happiermarriagesecrets.com/quiz and access the short quiz. You can get through the quiz in about 90 seconds or less. And I believe that your marriage is worth at least 90 seconds and more. I know there was a whole lot more, so I'm just saying that facetiously. But I'm seriously mentioning, though, that if you want to get a personalized results about your marriage and how to transform your marriage, then you want to take this quiz at happiermarriagesecrets.com/quiz. Okay? So take that, submit that today. Do that today. So as you've done that, then I want to say to you, let's now have the announcer give you some final words as we wrap things up here.
We've come to the end of another exciting show, and if you enjoyed this podcast, 1, make sure you give this show a rating and review. 2, subscribe to the show to get all new releases. And 3, get your complimentary copy of the 5 Secrets to a Happier Marriage ebook at kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. Again, it's kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. See the link in the show notes. Do it today. Don't delay. Thanks so much for listening, and make sure you tell one other spouse about this show, or better yet, share it with them. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face toward you and give you his peace, both now and forever.